Sonic X Shadow Generations has seemingly come out of the gate swinging with its widely praised release. With the oversaturation of 3D platformers nowadays, it's incredibly refreshing to see a game from one of the most inconsistent franchises released to international acclaim. Sonic's experiences in 3D have always been considered a tale of hit or miss. Some years you get given one of the best platformers released for the entire system at the time, such as Sonic Adventure 2 becoming one of the most important 3D platformers of the era, and then you have a year like 2013 with Sonic Lost World, which wasn't exactly a terrible game by any means, just painfully mediocre. And then you have this. Sonic as a character has always been a gaming icon. Ever since his initial debut in 1991, Sonic has maintained a worldwide fanbase purely down to how he was marketed. SEGA didn't hesitate to put Sonic's face everywhere in an aim to create a mascot that could rival Nintendo's very own Super Mario. Whilst Mario has always been seen as a silent hero who everyone could appreciate, Sonic took an approach that was much bolder. Sonic was, and still is, a character defined by his cocky attitude and rebellious nature, and that's what made him stand out among other gaming mascots at the time. Whilst we still see the sprinkles of Sonic's unabashed confidence, SEGA has opted to lean him in more of a grounded version of himself. Sonic Frontiers was the first game in the series to put the blue glow in a world that felt post-apocalyptic. Forces tried and failed this approach in many ways, but was still a game that gave me a vision for how they could revolutionize the franchise. I do truly believe that Forces had the potential to be one of the best Sonic games purely down to its narrative direction and deep focus on restoring the world after his assumed death, but the lack of engaging gameplay elements and poor pacing left it as a game for most of us to forget. But this journey of experimentation and forward trajectory has now led Sonic X Shadow Generations to become not just one of, if not the best 3D Sonic game ever made. But it is also the first time a Sonic game has included a story that genuinely made me feel like something had happened once the credits had rolled. This video is going to take a short look into the newly remastered Sonic Generations before diving deep into Shadow Generations, a beautiful game all about tragedy. Sonic Generations has always been my favourite 3D Sonic game of all time. It's a rare achievement for a 3D platformer that isn't from Nintendo to be as meaningful to me as this game is, which is a testament to its brilliance. Like most games in the franchise, Generations is a short and sweet adventure through a handful of stages that don't overstay their welcome. Each level in the game is condensed down to a linear yet open feeling world that emphasises Sonic's speed more than anything else. Generations is not by any means an easy game despite its clearly obvious stylistic choices that make it appeal to kids more than any other demographic, but each stage challenges you to adopt its design philosophy and learn its layout to adjust to the rapidly approaching endless voids or chasms you can only escape through by sliding underneath. Even Green Hill Zone doesn't hesitate to show the player just how treacherous the game can be, and I think that decision emulates Sonic's overconfident attitude perfectly. You're going to go into this game expecting to smash through each level at a record speed, which in some way, yes of course you are because you're the fastest fucking thing alive, but you'll soon learn that these stages aren't designed to be leisurely ran through. Generations is also a game that thrives in the time it was released, aka the boost era. Whilst yes, the boost in Sonic games has always been a widely debated topic on if it's actually good or not, there's one thing that no player can ignore with this mechanic. Sonic goes fast, sometimes even too fast to keep up with him. Despite many games in the franchise such as Sonic and the Secret Rings or Sonic Forces whittling its pace down to a more calm jog rather than a mad dash towards danger, Generations want you to feel like your speed is necessary to getting through the story, which by the way, let's talk about the story because we have a lot to go through and I'm not even at the main point of the video yet. The story of this game centers around Sonic celebrating his 20th birthday with the series' most iconic characters giving him a heartwarming display of affection in a vibrant and lush field. That is until the mysterious boss, later known as the Time Eater, shows up and completely crashes the party. Sonic tries saving them as they each get sucked away, but is left in a temporary state of paralysis before waking up in a world completely devoid of life. You complete Green Hill Zone in both 2D and 3D before saving Tails and questioning where you really are. Sonic goes off to discover more zones and then Sonic quickly returns with a beer belly. As you go through more stages and free each of his pals from a statue-like form, the two Sonics soon realise that they aren't the same, but still actually are. In a cutscene leading up to the first boss, the Death Egg, Sonic and Sonic are walking through a place that feels both dissimilar, yet one and the same, to the White Hub world they're trapped in. A wall of endless darkness consumes a room filled with 2 gargantuan doors that sandwich multiple chandeliers, as well as a wall with mirrors separating the 2 versions of Sonic from one another. Dr. Eggman then interrupts a short comedic scene between the 2 before classic Sonic chases him down, leaving modern Sonic isolated and confused. Something about this cutscene feels completely different to the rest of the game, but still feels like a necessary inclusion. Modern Sonic being locked away as classic Sonic leaps into the white void feels strangely emblematic of the era Sonic was in at the time. A lot of people didn't like how Sonic was getting slower and slower with each mainline entry up until Sonic Unleashed was released in 2008, but even that game had the Werehog, an alternate version of the blue hedgehog that moves at nowhere near the same speed. It feels like this cutscene was meant to show what Generations was aiming to do. Make Sonic games fast again. No other cutscene in the game has as much deeper meaning or symbolism attached to it, which is what makes this so interesting to me. As you keep traversing more and more levels and discovering more information about the beast terrorizing the group, Tails and Tails hypothesize that they're all stuck in a continuous warp through time, which has led both modern and classic characters to coexist with one another. Yeah, the story doesn't really make a lot of sense, but allow it. It's a series about a talking blue hedgehog. As a way to both tie into the story and celebrate Sonic's 20th anniversary, SEGA opted to make Generations a greatest hits collection across the whole franchise. Each level corresponds to a different game from its history, and acts as a way to satisfy both old and new players. The game doesn't feel smacked together and plain just because of its linearity and basic level choices. Both 2D and 3D stages feel like they are deserving of their reimagining, which is a challenge in this franchise because there are just so many levels they could have picked to show off, but the ones they chose just felt right. Except Planet Wisp though, because Wisps are just a fucking nuisance, fuck off. Green Hill is this rush of action through densely filled pathways that serve as a great intro. Sky Sanctuary is a gorgeous set piece with stunning vistas to look at and admire. Speed Highway, City Escape, and Rooftop Run all follow the meanings of their names respectively, and combine intricate platforming sections with incredibly fast sections that sometimes make the game feel like it's going to explode in front of me. And even Crisis City, which makes its appearance from that game, is an absolute treat to play through and makes me wish its origins were just better. And all this is complemented by one of the best soundtracks I've ever had the pleasure of listening to. These remixes of classic tracks feel poetic and tastefully created with passion, displayed in each and every second. These songs keep the integrity of the source material and redefine it to make a bubbly OST that captures the essence of who Sonic is masterfully. You can even unlock more songs and collectibles in the 90 challenge levels the game has, with 45 being assigned to each version of Sonic. To be completely honest, these challenges have never really been something of interest to me and feel more like a piece of side content if you're aiming to 100% the game like I did with the original. But that doesn't take away from the fun a lot of these still provide. And one thing I can't not mention in the video about this game is what the remaster is like in comparison to the original. In terms of visuals, it's barely an upgrade. This isn't a bad thing per se, because Generations has looked ahead of its time since its initial release, so I'm not really mad at all about the lack of graphical improvement. It's not anything crazy, but it's noticeable and appreciated. Other than that, basically everything else is identical, except the voice acting, which has been changed quite drastically. There's nothing really wrong with it, it just doesn't feel like it has the same magic to it anymore. The voice of Sonic feels more monotone and plainer, which I know lines up with how Frontiers did it, but in Generations it just doesn't really fit at all. I found myself kind of despising the changed dialogue by the end of the game, and I'm probably going to download a mod to switch it back to the original as soon as I can. But for what it is now, considering the side content, this remaster is still a must play for any platforming enthusiast. But what about the story? What about the symbolism behind it? Despite Sonic Generations being born in an era where the series was more playful, its story remains very grounded in the idea that whilst time may feel endless, there's only so far that it will go. Just before fighting the final boss, you are greeted with a set of gears, each containing a spot for the 7 Chaos Emeralds to activate them and work in synergy. There's no triumphant music here or intense visual effects bombarding the screen. It's just you. Upon activating the 7 gears, a large wheel guarding the final portal lights up with flames alongside a giant black wall of contorted and dissatisfying brick, embodying the very idea of time not being endless. Despite being fully aware of how much I'm overcomplicating this seemingly basic area, likely designed that way to clearly show the player that this is the end of the game and nothing more, looking back at it just makes me feel temporary. This world of vibrance and adventure through all of Sonic's greatest levels across his entire catalogue is not a world of excitement, but a world forever stuck in a set period of time. Up until the announcement of Sonic X Shadow Generations, these gears remained stationary. They were there to not only display the way of opening the chamber to the Time Eater, but also a visual metaphor for the Time Eater itself. This point in Sonic's life was swallowed by time itself, and Sonic Generations is a representation of the void that was left from it years after its success. A white void of nothingness from the series up until 2017's Sonic Mania, and ultimately, a white void to remind us that one day, we will be in this place too. Shadow Generations is a deeply traumatic journey through the history of one of the most beloved video game characters of all time. Yet it is simultaneously the most badass fucking game ever, holy shit. Shadow Generations is a game I can only describe as a miracle for the franchise. After a streak of horrible inconsistency and lackluster entries, we finally have a game that embraces the endless replayability of Sonic Generations level design mixed with its tight and responsive controls, as well as levels from the series that have been repurposed for a small yet very powerful game. If you were like me and played this just after your replay of Sonic Generations, you'll instantly notice just how beautiful this game is in comparison. Whilst the 2011 entry remaster isn't too dissimilar to the original, its brand new expansion is without a doubt the best the series has ever looked. From the immediacy of the beginning to Space Colony arc, we can see and feel just how alive they made this character and the world feel. The colony architecture floating in the near endless void of space helps to instantly sell the feeling that Shadow is much more universal in the timeline than Sonic is. The earth glistening in the background as you traverse these dynamic set pieces with rockets, projectiles, and even a gargantuan missile aimed directly at you makes this game feel astonishingly realistic, and reminded me of how gorgeous space looked in films such as Gravity or Interstellar. You're even transported through dimensions by none other than Black Doom himself, hovering rapidly through this dizzying cityscape as you chase him down before entering a fucking kaleidoscope, surfing down a building, and ultimately ending the stage with a mini boss battle atop a helipad roof. This is the first level, by the way. The other levels in game keep up with this one as well. Each stage is split into 2 acts, similarly to Sonic's story, except this time we play as modern Shadow in both stages. It's just split into 3D and 2D respectively. Rail Canyon is a zone all about linear speed and quick reaction times, set in an urban canyon that spans for miles. The graphical improvements here really shine, no pun intended, as the sun practically melts over the environmental hazards. The rail grinding here feels as robust as always, with precise movement being rewarding to you thanks to hidden pathways and collectibles to find in the level. Oh, and this is all before another eye-opening switch up into a cityscape once again, following in the footsteps of Frontier's cyberspace levels, but just done way better this time around. I don't think I've flipped around this much in a game ever, but I'm all here for it. Kingdom Valley is another marvellous reimagining of one of the best areas in Sonic 06, which is what I think this game nails best. Besides Space Colony Arc and Radical Highway, this game absolutely bathes in the exploration of older, more mistreated zones in the franchise and aims to paint them in a better light, which they absolutely nail. Sonic 06 makes Kingdom Valley a complete nightmare to do, purely down to just how broken the game is, but Shadow's time in here feels like what that game wanted out of a zone like this. It's so much fun climbing multiple megastructures located in a densely crowded valley, completely flooded in overgrown weeds and towering castles, that do an excellent job at making Shadow's movement feel perfect, which by the way, let's actually talk about Shadow's movement. If you watched any of the trailers leading up to this game's release, you would have seen Shadow's new Doom powers, which are tied to the story, and I know I will get to the story, alright, just let me cook for a minute. These powers are unlocked progressively throughout the game as each level introduces something new for the player to toy around with. From the opening moments, you're automatically granted Chaos Control, an ability practically synonymous with Shadow, so I don't feel like I need to do much heavy discussion about it. It freezes time, alright? Upon finishing the first 2 levels, you visit a menacing one-eyed object and are given the Doom Spears, an ability that lets you attack enemies and interact with certain environmental features in the game. You're then given the Doom Blast, a Street Fighter KO move that allows for some bonus movement options, Doom Surf, which was a real surprise to me considering how threatening water typically is in the franchise, but was actually something also teased in the upcoming 3rd movie, which acts as a clear demonstration of Shadow's immense physical power over Sonic. Doom Morph I'm not even going to give the time of day because it took me so long to figure out how to actually use it and it caused a lot of frustration with me. And finally Doom Wing, which is shown off in one of the coolest cutscenes I've ever seen for an ability showcase. Like, goddamn, just look at this. I went into the game slightly hesitant about how much I'd enjoy using them, but the game does a surprisingly good job at not cluttering all these abilities together into an unfun assortment of challenges to overcome. They all work in synergy with each other and work in tandem with the already swift gameplay it's designed around. They're a really unique and captivating addition to the game that make much more sense for him compared to, you know, a gun. But Shadow Generations isn't just some greatest hits collection like Sonic's was. It's an incredibly tragic yet heartwarming journey through the trauma the character has faced. Let's talk about the story. Before diving into the game itself, you get given an option to watch a cutscene about Shadow's origin story, and after over 20 years, it's still a deeply troubling tale. 50 years ago, aboard the space colony Ark, the genius Professor Gerald Robotnik sought to create the ultimate life form. He called his creation Shadow. He was raised alongside his granddaughter Maria and were inseparable from one another, but after a series of tragedies befell the Ark, the military aimed to cover everything up. They killed Maria in front of Shadow's eyes and locked him away. 50 years from that moment, Shadow was reawakened with nothing but rage flowing through his body. Shadow, I beg of you, for all the people on that planet. These words prevented Shadow from finishing his ultimate plan to destroy the world for what they did to him, but his past came back once again, to tear him apart. The game opens with an immediate flashback of this point in time, when Shadow was just an innocent creation formed by the DNA of a life form more powerful than he ever knew, until it was too late. He's quickly brought back to reality from Rouge, who invites him to Sonic's birthday party, tying into the original Generations storyline, albeit whilst ignoring the Shadow boss fight. He witnesses something dash through the Ark in a tunnel bending and contorting in on itself before we get the transition into the first stage, and we discover Black Doom's involvement in the story. This opening takes place just moments before the time he just sucks everyone away at the party, which happens alongside Shadow at the Ark. He opens his eyes in a white space not entirely the same as the others. This is Shadow's story. Upon leaving the Ark and re-entering white space, he notices a figure above the water. Someone who, for the past 50 years, he's never seen before.
Maria, wait!
Maria? No. She's gone. I'm seeing things.
Even with this seemingly real person in front of him, Shadow can't process the reality that's hit him. I think the way in which he ends this scene says a lot about his inner conflict with himself, much more than most people realise. Shadow is not a character that has been dealt a good hand. He witnessed an event at an age that could only cause deep psychological torture for him. Witnessing the death of the person you love most is something none of us will ever want to experience, but at the same time, I think it's happened to a lot of us in many ways. His trauma here is dealt very literally, with him grieving over the physical death of the person he cared for most, which ultimately was also the death of him. His confusion and anger towards the situation at hand is relatable because although he's just a hedgehog formed from mutated and powerful DNA, his response is nothing short of human. After defeating the first boss of the game, the Bio-Lizard, the creation that was meant as an alternative for Maria if Shadow wasn't to work, we see the Doom Core in the sky break apart whilst the white space opens up to introduce a much bigger world than we initially saw.
Shadow. You have made excellent progress. I would expect nothing less from my finest creation.
Finest creation? Black Doom. I destroyed you once. I will do it again.
I may be reading into this too much, but this scene is oddly cinematic to me. I see Black Doom in this scenario as an extension of Shadow's mind, the creator of all the dark thoughts in his head, the villain stopping Shadow from learning to slow down his anger and find peace within himself. Black Doom is not just a villain, he's Shadow's demons, a physical metaphor for the trauma that has engulfed him since the events of the Space Colony arc, and after travelling through more of the world and discovering all the collectibles and secrets hidden in white space, he hears a cry for help. Enraged by the sight of Black Doom's forces closing in on Maria, he kills them in a moment of violent rage, something he's wanted to do since the gun forces that took his life away from him all those years ago. Confused by the realization of Maria and Robotnik being alive, he realizes that this white space he's trapped in is based during the time where the disaster hadn't happened yet, which gives him a goal to try and reverse their fate. Shadow continues to battle the enemies from his past, like Metal Overlord, who takes him through a boss I would have only ever expected out of an ending of an anime. As more of Doom's core floods out, Robotnik admits to the deal he made with Black Doom to create Shadow, as he understands that the sins he's committed to making him are now back to haunt him again.
Maria's illness couldn't be treated on Earth. I could better manage her condition on the Ark, even if her family didn't like the idea. I attempted to develop the ultimate life form as a means to find a cure for Maria. My own experiments reached their frustrating limits. So when that alien warlord reached out to me and offered the miracle of chaos control, I accepted it.
Shadow isn't exactly adult during this cutscene. He acts triumphant in the face of danger, but something about his tone and body language to me feels elementary. It's the same feeling as when you're a kid and your imagination goes wild, making you feel like you're able to take on anything in the face of adversity. Oh, and you remember how I said that the story doesn't factor in Shadow's boss fight in the original? Well, it does, and in a very good way. The two battle it out and one of the Chaos Emeralds is taken from him. That's if he hadn't had a duplicate of it. Rouge kind of ruins this game for comedic value, so let's carry on psychoanalyzing a fucking hedgehog game. After fighting Mephiles, which is a really unexpected but welcome villain, Black Doom comes back again to remind Shadow of his imminent fate.
Don't be frightened. The promised time is nigh upon us, Shadow. Soon you will be mine.
Maria tries to fight back, but Shadow knows it's true. In a moment of SEGA badassery, Shadow drops this banger.
He's a warrior, a destroyer.
Yes, the warrior that will destroy you.
But he's completely overwhelmed with temper because of what he's done. He's getting more and more aggressive and just wants to tear the world apart and—
Shadow, no!
Maria?
It breaks my heart to see you so full of anger. This isn't who you are. Do you know why I named you Shadow? Because without light, there's only darkness. But a shadow will show you where to find the light. Do you understand? I don't want you to be driven by darkness. I want you to be happy. Stand in the light with peace in your heart.
this is one of, if not my favourite cutscene in the game. Maria in this moment is the angel on his shoulder. She's the one keeping him in control, and she's not willing to let Shadow be taken over by a force that creates a body filled with darkness. Maria is the light. But he can't face that light. He runs off, once again avoiding his trauma and tap dancing around the conversation. After acquiring the Doom Wing, Doom's core finally shatters, creating a whirlpool into him that Shadow has to reach. In a final promise to Maria, he lets go of his destructive anger, but continues to fight. And so, with the lives of the people he loves most at stake once again, the climax commences. And Shadow fights Devil Doom, the ultimate personification of his trauma. The size of Doom in this fight is clearly a stylistic choice, but also a representation of the sheer weight of Shadow's emotion being much larger than himself. In a final push for victory alongside a pouncing and bombarding song that feels perfectly faithful to the work of Crush 40, Shadow destroys Black Doom, and destroys his demons as well.
You cannot deny what you are. We are one and the same.
Shadow Vigil. This is the destiny I choose. Now, to end this!
I crafted everything up till now. And yet, you deny me! Shadow, you...
God, that cutscene fucking sucks. But after the fight is over, Shadow and Rouge swap the emeralds back from before, followed by Shadow's final moments with Maria and
I
Robotnik.
knew you could do it.
Maria,
I'm okay. Really.
Professor, what's happening?
Without Black Doom's influence, the time anomaly is beginning to heal. We are returning to our own point in time.
I'll stop Rouge. Use Chaos Control. Stop this moment in time.
Shadow? No. I don't want to be frozen in one place in time. Besides, your friends need your help.
But you don't know what's going to happen.
I know I'll see you again. And if fate draws us apart, I will always be in your heart.
Maria. Wait.
In a final moment of despair, Shadow can't do anything but clench his fists, and slides away for the very last time. For a series that has always felt like a slightly more mature version of Mario, Shadow Generations is much more than mature. It's a reflection of all of Shadow's trauma, problems, and emotions. Despite being given a second chance, he's once again still left with the pain that changed his life forever. In a game so drowned in rock instrumentation, movie-level fight scenes, and a gameplay loop perfectly sculpted for light-hearted fun, Shadow Generations isn't just a game with a narrative, it's a narrative disguised as a game. It's the perfect capture of Shadow as a character, and is a showcase of how his life has been impacted by a psychological wound that has never fully healed. His time in the light acted as a moment of remembrance, a moment to process his grief, and at the end of it all, we know that the death of the ones we care for most will always be with us, one way or another. Thank you to those who have stuck around for the whole video. I appreciate you so much, and I just can't thank you enough for supporting the channel. This game is honestly just incredible. It's one of my favourite games that's come out in recent memory. It's probably my favourite game that's come out this year that I've actually managed to play, and I just couldn't help but make a video on it. Please go and watch Shadow: The Dark Beginnings. It's just an amazing little anime. It's like 15 minutes long. I really recommend it. Please buy the game. Please play Shadow Generations if you haven't. If you've not played the game and you've just watched the video anyway, I'm sorry for spoiling basically the entire game to you, but you signed up to it. Yeah, the next video is going to be absolutely massive, guys. I really can't wait to show it to you. Take care and peace.